Here we go with Watership Down, Nicholas, part 4. The Departure. Da-da-da-da. Fu Inli. Fu Inli means after moonrise. Rabbits, of course, have no idea of precise time or punctuality. In this respect, I know.
Punctuality.
In this respect, they are much the same as primitive people, who often take several days over assembling for some purpose and then several more to get started. Before such people can act together, a kind of telepathic feeling has to flow through them and ripen to the point when they all know that they are ready to begin. Isn't that kind of, before I go on, isn't that kind of like Treebeard and his buddies?
Yeah.
Spend like 3 days just saying, hey guys, what's up? You remember that in the movie?
Yeah, long time no see. How are the kids?
Yeah, pretty much. So if you guys need that reference, go to Lord of the Rings and watch it. Let's see. Anyone who has seen a martena and swallows, and martins and swallows in September, assembling on telephone wires, twittering, making short flights singularly and in groups in the open, over the open, stubby fields, return to form longer and even longer lines above the yellow verges of the lanes. The hundreds of individual birds merging and blending in a mounting excitement into swarms, and those swarms coming loosely and untidily together to recreate a great unorganized flock, thick at the center, ragged at the edges, which breaks and reforms continuously like waves, clouds, or waves. Listen to this guy with his goddamn papers and crinkling over my shit. What the hell's wrong with this guy?
It's called eating.
You fucking nasty son of a bitch. Until a moment that a greater part, but not all of these, know that the time has come and they are off, and have begun once more that great southward flight which many will not survive. Anyone seeing this has seen at work the current that flows. Among creatures who think of themselves primarily as a part of a group and only secondary, if at all, as individuals, to fuse them together and impel them into action without conscious thought or will, has seen at work the angel which drove the first crusade into Antioch and drives the lemmings into the sea. It was actually about an hour after sunrise.
Lazy ass fucking buddy.
Yep. And a good while before midnight, when Hazel and Fiber once more came out of their burrow behind the brambles and slipped quietly along the bottom of the ditch. With them was a third rabbit, Halaroo. Pipkin, a friend of Fiber's. Halaroo means that any small concavity in the grass where moisture may collect. The dimple formed by a dandelion or a twistle cup. He too was small and inclined to be timid. Hazel and Fiber spent the greater part of their last evening in the warren in persuading him to join them. Pipkin had agreed rather hastily. He still felt extremely nervous about what might happen once they left the warren, and decided that the best way to avoid trouble would be keep close to Hazel and do exactly what he said. The three were still in the ditch when Hazel heard a movement above. He looked up quickly. "Who's there?" he said. "Dandelion?" "No, I'm Hawkbit," said the rabbit, who was peering over the edge, and jumped down amongst them, landing rather heavily. "Do you remember me, Hazel? We were in the same burrow during the snow last winter. Dandelion told me you were going to leave the warren tonight. If you are, I want to come with you." Hazel could recall Hawkbit, a rather slow, stupid rabbit whose company for 5 snowbound days underground had been distinctly tedious. Still, he thought this was no time to pick and choose. Although Bigwig might succeed in talking over one or two, most of the rabbits they would expect to join them would not come from the Owsla. They would be outskirters who were getting a thin time and wondering what to do about it. He was running over some of these in his mind when Dandelion appeared. "No sooner than we'll be off, I reckon," says Dandelion. I don't much like the look of things. After I persuaded Hawkbit here to join us, I was just starting to talk to a few more when I found out that Toadflax fellow had followed me down the run. "I want to know what you're up to," he said, and I don't think he believed me when I told him I was only trying to find out whether there was other rabbits who wanted to leave the warren. He asked me if I was sure that I wasn't working up some sort of plot against the Thierera, and he got awfully angry and suspicious. It put the wind up in me, to tell you the truth, so I brought Hawkbit along and left it at that. "Well, I don't blame you," said Hazel. "Knowing Toadflax, I'm surprised he didn't knock you over first and then ask questions afterwards. All the same, let's wait a little longer. Blackberry ought to be here soon." Oh, and by the way, if you guys see the TV show of Blackberry, they cut the poor guy's balls off and made him into a woman. So.
And this is 20 years ago.
Yeah, geez. Okay. That's news to Blackberry.
Yeah, Blackberry in the book, male. Hawkbit, male, and kind of stupid. Hawkbit in the TV show, not the dumbest rabbit, but not the smartest.
Oh boy. Time passed, and they crouched in silence while the moon's shadows moved northward in the grass. At last, just as Hazel was about to run down the slope to Blackberry's burrow, he saw him come out of his hole, followed by no less than 3 rabbits. One of these Buckthorn Hazel knew well, and he was glad to see him, for he knew him for a tough, sturdy fellow who considered certain to get into the Owsla once you reach his full strength. But I dare say he's impatient, thought Hazel. Or he might come off worse in a scuffle over a doe and take it hard. Well, with him and Bigwig, at least we shan't be too badly off if we run into any fighting. He did not recognize the other 2 rabbits, and when Blackberry told him their names, Speedwell and Acorn, he was none the wiser. But this was not surprising, for they had the typical outskirters. Thin-looking 6-monthers with a strained, wary look of those who only too well used to get the thin end of the stick. They looked curiously at Fiber, and from what Blackberry told them, they had been almost expecting to find Fiber foretelling doom in a poetic torrent. Instead, he seemed more calm and normal than the rest. The certainty of going had lifted the weight off from Fiber. More time slowly went by, and Blackberry scrambled up into the fern and then returned to the top of the bank. Fidgeting and nervously, half inclined to bolt at nothing, Hazel and Fiber remained in the ditch, nibbling half-heartedly at the dark grass. And at last, Hazel heard what was he listening for? A rabbit? Or was it two? Approaching from the wood. Moments later, Bigwig was in the ditch. Behind him came a hefty, brisk-looking rabbit, something over 12 months old. He is well known by sight to all the warren, for his fur is almost entirely gray, with patches of near white that caught in the moonlight as he sat scratching himself without speaking. This was Silver, a nephew of the Theorera, who is serving his first month in the Owsla.
Yeah, they're in the shit now.
Yeah. Hazel could not help feeling relieved that Bigwig had brought only Silver, a quiet, straightforward fellow who had not yet found his feet amongst the veterans. When Bigwig spoken earlier of sounding out the Owsla, Hazel was in two minds. This is only too likely that they'd encounter dangers beyond the warren and they'd be able to stand in need of some good fighters. Again, if Fiber was right and the whole warren was in imminent peril, then of course they ought to welcome any rabbit who is ready to join them. On the other hand, there seemed to be no point in taking particular pains to get a hold of rabbits who is going to behave like toadflax. Whatever we settle down in the end, thought Hazel, I'm determined to see that Pipkin and Fiber aren't sat on and cuffed around until they're ready to run any risk just to get away. But is Bigwig going to see it like that? You know, Silver, don't you? Says Bigwig, breaking in on his thoughts. Apparently some of the younger fellows in the Owsla has been giving him a thin time, teasing him about his fur, you know. And they say he only got his place because of the Thera. I thought I was going to get some more, but I suppose nearly all the Owsla feel they're very well off where they're at. He looked about him, and I say, there isn't many here, are there? Well, what do you think it's really worth going on this idea? Silver was about to speak when suddenly there was a pattering of undergrowth and 3 more rabbits came over the bank from the wood. Their movement was direct and perceptible and quite unlike earlier haphazard approach of those who were now gathered in the ditch. The largest of the 3 newcomers was in front, and the 2 others had followed as though under orders. Hazel sensed at once that there was nothing in common with him and his companions. Startled and sat up tensely. Fiber muttered in his ear, "Oh, Hazel, they've come too," but broke off short. Bigwig turned towards them and stared, and his nose working rapidly. The 3 came up to him, straight up to him. "Thaleni," says the leader. "You know me perfectly well," replied Bigwig, "and I know you, Holly. What do you want?" "You're under arrest." "Under arrest? What do you mean? What for?" "Spreading dissension and inciting to mutiny. Silver, you're under arrest too for failing to report Toadflex this evening and causing your duty to devolve on a comrade. You're both to come with me." Immediately, Bigwig fell on him, scratching and kicking. Holly fought back, his followers closed in, looking for an opening to join the fight and pin Bigwig down. Suddenly, from the top of the bank, Buckthorn flung himself headlong into the scuffle and knocking one of the guards flying from a kick from his hind legs and then closed in on the other. He followed a moment later by Dandelion, who landed full on the rabbit who Buckthorn just kicked. Both guards broke clear and looked around for a moment and then leaped up to the bank into the wood. Holly struggled free of Bigwig and crouched on his haunches, scuffling his front paws and growling, as rabbits will when angry. He was about to speak when Hazel faced him. "Go," said Hazel firmly and quietly, "or we'll kill you." "It is you that'll be killed. You know what this means? I am Captain of Owsla. You know that, don't you?" "Go," repeated Hazel, "or you'll be killed." "It'll you be who'll be killed," replied Holly. And without another word, he too went back up the bank and vanished into the wood. Dandelion was bleeding from the shoulder, and he licked the wound for several minutes and turned to Hazel. "They won't be long before they come back, you know, Hazel," he said. "They gone to turn out the Owsla, and then we'll be in for it right enough." "We ought to move at once," says Fiber. "Yes, the time has come now, all right," replied Hazel. "Come on, down the stream, and then we'll follow the bank. That'll help us to keep together." "Well, if you want to take my advice," began Bigwig. "If we can't stand here any longer, we shan't able to," answered Hazel. With Fiber beside him, he led down the ditch, down to the slope. Less than a minute, the little band of rabbits disappeared into the dim, moonlit night. That is the end of number 4. 16 minutes and 52 seconds. What do you think? So, any kind of flack or feedback on that?
Well,
Yeah.
they're now rebels.
Well,
They beat up the cops and took off.
okay. Well, we all know what that was going to eventually lead to. So, they'd rather just arrest the 2 Owsla guys. They didn't give a shit about the outskirter pricks.
Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah, piss off, get the hell out of here. We don't care, you dick."
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's, I mean, rabbits being rabbits. I mean, I don't know. That's good times. So, there you go.
Well, they're making changes.
Yeah, they're making changes.